She accused a calm, older black man of carrying a counterfeit passport, then tore it in half right in front of everyone, never realizing he was the FAA inspector assigned to audit her gate. As the automatic doors glided open, Raymond Dandridge stepped into the bustling departure hall at Hartsfield-Jackson. On the surface, he looked like any other traveler, a dark blue windbreaker, crisply pressed slacks, and a plain black leather briefcase swinging lightly at his side. No flashing credentials, no entourage, no sign of official rank. Just a composed, 57-year-old man moving with steady confidence. But beneath that calm exterior lay a mission that no one around him could have guessed. Raymond had dedicated nearly 30 years to the FAA. In the beginning, his work focused on aircraft maintenance and safety. But over time, as troubling reports about ground staff discrimination mounted, his role shifted. No uniform these days, his power came from what he saw, what he documented, and what he could change. This visit wasn't simply another routine inspection. It was a covered field audit, triggered by 4 separate complaints in 2 months. The pattern was clear: black and brown passengers were being singled out, interrogated, and in some cases denied boarding, under vague claims of security concerns. So Raymond arrived alone, anonymous. Nobody knew who he truly was, not the TSA, not the gate staff, not the other travelers, and that was precisely the point. He moved through the terminal, scanning quietly, alert to subtle patterns, the tone of voices, the questions asked, the people smiled through, the ones frowned upon. At a coffee stand, he paused for a moment of normalcy and ordered a small Americano. The barista, a young man with a nose ring and an awkward energy, handed him the cup with a smile. "Flying domestic or international today?" the kid asked conversationally. "International," Raymond replied, sipping his coffee. "Toronto?" He nodded with a faint smile. "A few times. Always something new to see." That wasn't a lie. Toronto was one of his preferred inspection cities: fair staff, predictable audits. But today, he wasn't focused on the destination. His attention was locked on gate C-14. As he approached the corridor, loudspeaker announcements buzzed overhead. "Final boarding call for flight 8802 to Montreal, passengers proceed to gate A2. Raymond didn't hurry. He had time. As he walked, he mentally catalogued each gate agent's mannerisms: who smiled, who barely looked up, who seemed tense. When he reached C-14, the waiting area was moderately crowded. Travelers slouched in chairs, checking phones, balancing children, or quietly bickering over Bluetooth. The air carried a familiar swirl of pretzel salt and floor cleaner. At the counter, a woman with platinum blonde hair and tight brows typed briskly into the reservation system. Her name badge read S. Wilcox. Raymond stepped forward, passport in hand, and offered a polite greeting. "Good afternoon. Checking in for Toronto." She didn't look up. "Passport." He handed it over. Her eyes scanned the document for an unusually long time. Her fingers paused, then she glanced at him with a skeptical squint. "You sure this is yours?" Raymond raised an eyebrow, calm but surprised. "Yes." She flipped the passport over again, muttering under her breath. "What's your reason for visiting Canada?" she asked in a clipped voice. "Business," he replied without pause. "What business?" "Transportation," he answered, which was true, broad enough to keep cover intact, accurate enough to hold up. She tapped the keyboard again. "Step aside while I verify this." He quietly moved near a pillar and waited, eyes steady. Watching. Observing. That was the job. Measure reactions, test fairness, see who was treated with dignity and who was not. Stephanie Wilcox scrolled through her system, shaking her head and shooting him a look of mild disgust. A silent "Can you believe this guy?" for the next passenger to see. Raymond recognized the pattern immediately. The next passenger, a white man in a Harvard hoodie, stepped up. She asked for his passport, smiled, and waved him through in seconds. Raymond took a slow breath. More passengers followed. Each processed with ease. Smiles. Pleasant tones. Nothing like what he'd received. After 5 minutes, he stepped forward once more. "Excuse me, has my document been verified?" She didn't bother meeting his eyes, still pounding on the keyboard, irritation practically dripping from her posture. Finally, she sighed dramatically and looked up. "Sir, I'll ask you again, are you sure this is your passport?" He met her look calmly. "Yes." "This photo doesn't look like you," she snapped. A woman nearby looked up, confused, glancing from Raymond to the passport, then back again, but said nothing. "It was issued last year," Raymond explained. "Where were you born?" "Baltimore," he replied evenly. "Middle name?" "Lorenzo." She paused, typing again, frowning. Then her face hardened. "This is fake anyway," she declared. And before Raymond could react, she seized the passport by its edge and ripped it in two, the pieces landing on the counter like scraps. A gasp rippled through the passengers nearby. Someone muttered, "No way." Stephanie crossed her arms with an air of triumph. "You'll need to wait for airport security. You may be detained for attempting to travel with forged documents." Raymond regarded her steadily. Then, in a voice that carried surprising calm, he said, "Could you repeat what you just said?" She smirked. "You heard me." A heavy silence settled over the area. Some passengers shifted in their seats. A few had pulled out their phones, quietly recording. Then a woman in a long coat behind the rope barrier stepped forward, phone camera aimed and rolling. "Ma'am," she called out, "he only asked about his passport." Raymond stayed where he was, composed, knowing this moment would change everything. "Please step back," Stephanie barked, her tone sharp. Before things could spiral further, another voice joined in, a young man wearing a Delta crew badge. "Is there a problem here?" Stephanie shot him a look. "I have a suspected forgery," she announced briskly. "I've already destroyed the document." The crew member's face fell. "You tore up his passport?" "It was fake," she insisted. The young man turned to Raymond, uneasy. "Sir, do you have any other ID?" Without a hint of panic, Raymond opened his briefcase and calmly displayed his federal identification, not handing it over, just showing it long enough for the crew member's eyes to widen in shock. "Sir," he stammered, "are you with the FAA?" Raymond nodded, steady as stone. "I am." Stephanie froze. Raymond quietly put the ID away. "Now, I'll need the names of every gate staff member on duty today," he said, his voice unwavering. The silence that followed was almost painful. Travelers weren't sure whether to cheer, keep recording, or just stare. Stephanie opened her mouth but found no words. "You have just destroyed the passport of a federal inspector performing a live audit," Raymond added evenly. "You also made false claims and denied a traveler boarding without cause. I recommend you call your supervisor now." But there was no covering this up. The fallout had already begun. One woman, pretending to scroll on her phone, held her camera higher to get a better angle. After Stephanie had torn the passport, and Raymond had revealed who he truly was, the phones began rising all around like flowers leaning toward sunlight. A hush fell over the area, cracked by whispers that quickly turned into murmurs, and those murmurs soon grew into clearly spoken disbelief. Did she really tear it up? Did he say FAA? That's going viral tonight, no question. The woman in the long coat kept her lens pointed at Raymond. Wasn't he shouting, wasn't he making threats, just standing there, perfectly composed, while everything around him started to come apart. Stephanie looked like she wished the earth would swallow her. Still behind the counter, arms folded in a protective grip, she flicked her eyes from Raymond to her computer screen, as if hoping for a magic fix. The Delta crew member who'd seen Raymond's FAA badge was now talking rapidly into his handheld radio, stepping away from the counter. Raymond stayed put. A middle-aged man in a charcoal blazer approached politely. "Sir, would you like a seat while this is sorted out?" "I'm fine, thank you," Raymond replied. A man with a tablet nearby muttered, "This is exactly why people hate flying," and the woman next to him nodded. "All smiles for the others," she said, and then she flips on him the minute he shows up. From across the concourse, another gate agent, an older man with salt and pepper hair from gate C13, appeared and gave Stephanie a discreet signal to come over. She ignored him, instead turning back to Raymond. Her voice was lower now, almost pleading. "I'm sure we can resolve this without blowing it out of proportion." Raymond met her eyes. "You made it a bigger problem the moment you assumed my ID was fake." She flinched. It hadn't been loud or angry, but it hit hard. Meanwhile, a security officer arrived, not aggressive, more puzzled, as if someone had only half briefed him. He looked between Stephanie, Raymond, and the group of onlookers. "Everything all right here?" he asked. Raymond turned calmly. "She destroyed a federal document. Mine. Without justification." The guard blinked. "Would you like to file a report?" From the row of chairs, a woman spoke sharply, "He's doing more than filing a report, check Twitter." Another voice chimed in, "It's already up. I posted it 2 minutes ago, 300 views and climbing." Stephanie tried to interject. "He refused to cooperate with our verification." Raymond cut her off with steady precision. "I provided a valid, active U.S. passport. Answered your questions. Waited where you asked. There are cameras recording right above us." He gestured to the ceiling-mounted cameras. The security officer followed his gaze, then pressed the mic on his shoulder. "Dispatch, confirm camera coverage at gate C14. Possible federal issue." Just then, another presence stepped forward, a woman in a navy blazer, polished heels clicking on the tile, clipboard tucked under her arm. Her laminated badge read Zone Supervisor. "Miss Wilcox," she said firmly, "please come with me." Stephanie hesitated, then obeyed. The supervisor turned to Raymond with a composed nod. "Sir, may I speak with you in private?" Raymond nodded. "Of course." They walked toward a side hallway near the jet bridge, out of the public eye, but the story had already broken loose, unstoppable, bouncing from phone to phone. Voices rose behind them, trading shock, anger, disbelief. "Man, they picked the wrong guy today. He didn't even get mad. Yeah, and he's got receipts." Inside the corridor, the temperature dipped slightly. The room itself was spare, with dull beige walls and a low humming vent, a table bolted to the floor, and a mounted camera that had seen more than its share of tense conversations. The supervisor, whose badge read N. Morales, shut the door gently before sitting down across from him. She looked steady, but cautious, someone trying to hold a storm back with a single checklist. "I'm Nicole Morales," she began evenly. "I'd like to get everything on the record, correctly." "Raymond Dandridge," he answered. She clicked her pen. "Are you with the FAA?" Raymond reached for his briefcase, withdrew the slim black folder, and handed over his identification. Nicole's eyes widened as she took in the gold seal, the photo, the ID number. She sat up straighter. "You were performing an inspection." "I was," Raymond confirmed, "until things took another direction." Nicole exhaled, shoulders tightening. "I need to notify my terminal director and the airport police." "I expected as much," Raymond replied. "You may want to pull the surveillance video from gate C14 while you're at it," Raymond finished. Nicole stood abruptly, a new awareness dawning of just how big the situation had become. Raymond stayed seated, his finger tapping lightly on the table. He wasn't nervous, he was simply calculating. This wasn't his first time uncovering serious misconduct, but it was the first time he'd seen someone rip apart a federal passport in front of a live audience. Moments later, a uniformed officer stepped into the room. His badge read Sergeant D. Koenig. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, his expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Dandridge?" he asked. "Yes," Raymond replied. "I've been asked to escort you to the terminal office while we get this cleared up." Raymond offered a small, controlled smile. "Am I being detained, Sergeant?" Koenig paused. "No, sir. We just need to verify a few things." Raymond nodded. "Then I'll walk." They moved down a corridor, Nicole on one side, Koenig on the other, heading toward the secured section of the terminal. Nicole kept glancing at her phone, scrolling through an endless stream of notifications. She was already 2 steps behind a story that was moving at lightning speed. When they arrived at the terminal's operations office, the place was in chaos. A junior supervisor stood near the front, holding 2 printed pages, eyes wide. Another woman with a badge identifying her as airline legal counsel was whispering urgently into a phone in the corner. The tension in the room clung to every surface. Raymond took a seat, opened his briefcase, and removed a slim folder. Inside, a detailed list of complaints filed with the FAA, 4 separate names, 4 different dates, all echoing the same concern: travelers who had felt unfairly targeted, singled out, or blocked from boarding at gate C14, with no explanation beyond security concerns. He laid the folder on the table. Nicole stepped closer to skim the first page, her jaw tightening as she read. She stayed silent for a moment, then asked quietly, "Why wasn't this flagged before?" Raymond paused. "Because my goal wasn't to get someone fired. It was to see if the complaints were real." A younger staffer slipped into the office and bent to whisper in Nicole's ear. She went pale. "What is it?" Raymond asked. "The video," she replied grimly. "Passenger footage. It's already on 3 major news accounts." Raymond leaned back slightly. "That was fast." "Too fast," Nicole muttered, exchanging a glance with the legal counsel, who was now off the phone and visibly shaken. "This could go federal by morning," the lawyer said. Raymond looked up at the clock on the wall. It was 11 a.m. He'd only walked into this airport 2 hours ago. Sergeant Koenig stepped forward. "We've reviewed the security footage. It backs up everything you said. You remained calm, answered every question, never raised your voice." Raymond nodded. "I expected as much. Thank you." Nicole cleared her throat. Do you wish to file a formal complaint now, or wait for the FAA to conclude their investigation? Raymond looked at her evenly. You should be more concerned with what's already been filed. This isn't an isolated event, and you know that. While the airline staff scrambled to get ahead of the spiraling crisis, the wider world had already made up its mind. No one outside was waiting for the official version. Raymond wasn't there to argue or demand apologies. His job was to document the facts and ensure what had happened at Gate C-14 would not be brushed aside. Nicole stood by the corner of the office, her blazer folded over a chair, sleeves pushed up, eyes scanning a tablet feed showing trending hashtags. 2 more senior staff had arrived in the last 15 minutes. 1, Earl Bronson, a regional operations manager, had been dragged out of a working lunch 2 terminals over. The other, Lana Feld, served as legal counsel for the airline's entire Southeast division. Her voice was professional, practiced, but lacked any warmth. We are fully committed to investigating this event, she announced, folding her hands like she was at a corporate meeting, and cooperating with all relevant federal agencies. Raymond, legs crossed, left his FAA ID in plain view on the table. I'm sure you are, he replied calmly, but let's be clear. This isn't a simple misunderstanding. Your employee destroyed a government-issued passport, accused me of carrying fake documents, and denied me boarding, all without following proper protocol. Earl tried to jump in. We understand tensions can run high. Raymond cut him off, still composed. Mine weren't. The room went silent. Nicole pulled a small envelope from her drawer and slid it across the table toward Raymond. The pieces of your passport, she said awkwardly. In case you need them for documentation. He glanced at the envelope, but didn't touch it. Thank you. Lana leaned forward a little. Mr. Dandridge, will you be pursuing legal action? I'm not here to talk about lawsuits, Raymond replied. I'm here to finish my audit. A shift rippled through the room, the moment where everyone realized the story was only beginning. Raymond pulled another printed sheet from his folder. I will submit this report to FAA Internal Affairs by the end of the day, he told them, including a detailed account of what I experienced, plus observations on staff behavior, gate surveillance, and your supervisor's response. He paused, then met each person's eyes. I've also included a pattern of complaints over the past 8 months. 5 separate travelers, 4 of those named Ms. Wilcox. Nicole winced. Earl cleared his throat. We were not aware of that trend. That, Raymond said, is exactly the problem. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Lana said, if we arranged a follow-up with our HR and diversity and inclusion teams, would you be willing to participate? Raymond tilted his head. Your departments can do what they like. My role is to report the truth, not help you fix your press statement. Nicole rubbed her forehead, the weight of everything crashing down. Outside the office, the buzz only grew. A junior staffer entered, holding up a tablet with a live view of a viral video. Raymond's encounter, she read aloud, 2.7 million views. Comments going crazy. CNN's asking for a statement. So is Channel 5 Atlanta. Raymond sighed, quietly exhausted. Tell them I'm not available for comment. He stood, slid his folder back into his briefcase, and scanned the room once more. You have a window to fix this, he told them. It won't stay open for long. Nicole followed him to the door. Where will you go now? I'll finish my route, Raymond said. Then I return to DC in the morning. She looked like she wanted to say something, maybe an apology, but the words wouldn't come. Raymond stepped back into the terminal, where the tension had thickened. A woman with a toddler strapped to her chest gave him a quiet thumbs up. A man further down nodded respectfully. Raymond didn't return the gestures, not because he didn't appreciate them, but because this was no longer about him. As he walked back into the concourse, it was painfully clear this was no longer about a single gate agent. It was about every passenger she'd ever intimidated, every person who'd been silenced, and every silent witness who'd seen it happen. Upstairs, the regional control center had switched from flight maps and weather updates to full-on damage control. Monitors normally showing flight paths now glowed with social media feeds and breaking news alerts. Lana Feld rushed back into the ops floor, her clipboard gone this time. "How bad is it?" she asked no one in particular. A wiry tech with a headset hanging off one ear turned his monitor to face her. "You tell me." On screen, the top post on X played in a constant loop, Raymond standing calmly, Stephanie tearing the passport, and the audible gasps of horrified passengers. 58,000 shares in the last hour, the tech added. Good Morning America and CNBC are both tagging us for a statement. Someone near the back asked, "Can we do damage control?" Lana shook her head grimly. "No. This is beyond control. This is containment." Meanwhile, in a small briefing room off the main ops floor, a high-level crisis meeting had already started. Nicole Morales sat at a corner table, breathing unsteadily. Her name now lived on an incident file marked Federal Violation Review. Across from her sat her director, Lionel Griggs, a man who always seemed on the edge of blowing up, but never quite did. He slapped a printout onto the table. "This Agent Wilcox, how the hell was she still on rotation?" Nicole hesitated. "We had no written complaints on file. Nothing formal." 4 separate passengers listed her name in FAA complaints, Lionel snapped. "You're telling me not one of those ever reached you?" "I didn't see them. I'm not sure if HR." "Stop," Lionel cut her off sharply. "This isn't about HR anymore. One of our gate agents humiliated and falsely accused a federal inspector, on video, in broad daylight, with passengers watching, and then tore up his passport." He glared at her. "I don't care if she was sweet to everyone on her lunch break, she may have just cost us more than bad publicity. She might have cost us our federal partnerships." A junior assistant stepped in with a tablet. FAA Communications just released a statement confirming Mr. Dandridge was on a live profiling inspection. Lionel rubbed his temples, as if trying to keep his head from splitting apart. Back out on the floor, Lana was fielding call after call, legal teams lining up in panic. Managers, union representatives, and journalists had all converged on the story. The video hadn't just gone viral, it had gone nuclear. "I just got off the phone with CBC Toronto," one PR staffer announced. "They're handing this to you." She looked at Lana. "They want to know why a black federal inspector couldn't board a flight to Canada without being accused of fraud." Lana offered a hard, cold smile. "They know the answer already. They just want us to say it out loud." The room went silent for a beat. Then Lana continued, "Has Wilcox been pulled from all assignments?" Nicole, standing close by, nodded. "She's on administrative leave. We took her badge about an hour ago." "Not good enough," Lana snapped. "We need a public-facing decision by 5 p.m. And we need a script for what to tell other agents if this spills over to other airports." Another supervisor cut in, "It already has." Someone dug up an old clip from Lax with a similar situation. Guess who the gate agent was? Lana blinked. You're kidding. Nope. Wilcox. She worked there before she transferred here. Silence crashed through the room again. The PR officer looked up from his phone. We've got about 6 hours before we trend again on the evening news. What's our message? Lana paused, choosing her words carefully. You tell them the agent has been removed, that we're cooperating with federal investigators, and that we're reviewing every policy tied to ID verification and gate conduct. Should we apologize? Someone asked. Not yet, Lana replied. Why not? Because, she said bluntly, if the FAA publishes their audit report this week, we'll be apologizing for far more than just this. But what they didn't yet realize was that Raymond's report wasn't the real bombshell anymore. It was the spark for everything about to come next. By 2:17 that afternoon, the raw video clip of Stephanie Wilcox tearing up Raymond's passport had been reshared more than 100,000 times. No voiceovers, no edits, just a quiet man having his identity dismantled in public. It wasn't just civil rights groups or travel bloggers picking it up. CNN pushed out a headline: FAA inspector accused of forgery during routine gate audit. Within minutes, MSNBC, CBC, and Al Jazeera had joined the chorus. The comments were furious. I've flown through that terminal. I know the look those agents give you. Imagine tearing up a government document on camera and acting like nothing happened. This is exactly why people stop trusting systems. Raymond's name was trending within an hour. Someone had even pulled an old photo of him speaking at an aviation safety conference, pairing it with headlines like "Wrong Man, Wrong Move," and "FAA Undercover Inspector Humiliated at Gate C-14. But it wasn't just sympathy. It was vindication. Other passengers began sharing their own stories. She stopped me once because I looked nervous. I was rushing to my mother's funeral. She asked my 12-year-old if he'd really packed his own bag. Who does that? I recognized her face the moment I saw the clip. The pattern was unmistakable. And with the video proof out there, no one was willing to doubt them anymore. Inside FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C., the Office of Communications was buried in phone calls. Wanda Kim, the division director, was going through the timeline on a large wall monitor. So he didn't reveal himself until after security stepped in, she asked. No, replied one of her aides. He stayed undercover until she doubled down and ripped up the document. Only then did he show ID. The crowd was with him the whole time. No aggressive behavior. None. The footage confirms it. Wanda nodded. Exactly what we trained him to do. Observe, document, verify. Let them show you who they are. She turned to another assistant. Pull Wilcox's work history. We did. It's not pretty, came the reply. How bad? 2 internal reports from her lax days, complaints about bias and aggressive behavior. Closed without review. Nothing escalated until now. Wanda shut her laptop. Tell legal we'll cooperate fully with all reviews. But we're also going to issue new guidance for any gate agent working under federal contracts. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, Stephanie Wilcox was sitting in a sterile conference room far from the gates. Her badge deactivated, her phone blowing up with memes, screenshots, and cutting public commentary. Her hands shook as she scrolled through them. Imagine being that confident and that wrong. She didn't know he wrote the rule book. Stephanie barely recognized herself in those images. Maybe she'd never had to before. No manager had confronted her, no coworker had pushed back. Until today. A gentle knock at the door pulled her out of her spiral. Nicole Morales stepped in, arms crossed, her face unreadable. Stephanie couldn't speak. Nicole sat across from her and said calmly, "You're going to hear from the FAA in the next 48 hours. For what?" Stephanie whispered. Nicole didn't flinch. For questioning. For a written statement. And probably a full inquiry into your history here and in Los Angeles. Stephanie opened her mouth, then shut it again. Nicole added quietly, "You need to understand something. He wasn't just another traveler. And this wasn't just a bad day." Stephanie's voice was thin. "I didn't know." Nicole stood, leveling her with a firm stare. "That's the problem." By then, the video had broken out of the airport walls. And no one could unsee what they had seen or unlearn what they now knew. 2 days later, Raymond was back in his small FAA office in D.C. Nothing grand, just a desk, one window overlooking a parking lot, shelves stacked with binders older than most new hires. He was reviewing the final draft of his incident report, 34 pages, meticulously time-stamped, every observation cross-checked. His phone buzzed. A text from FAA Internal Affairs, Toronto office confirms 3 similar complaints against same airline over the past year. Same pattern. Raymond let the message hang for a moment before leaning back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He suspected this was bigger than one bad actor. You don't get a pattern like this by accident, you get it from something left to rot. That afternoon, he joined a virtual meeting with Wanda Kim and several other FAA regional inspectors. Their faces showed exhaustion, heavy eyes, tight jaws, resigned frustration. Wanda wasted no time. "We're compiling all identity-based complaints tied to the top 10 busiest U.S. airports, not just racial profiling, but language barriers, age, perceived immigration status. It's a mess." A young inspector from Phoenix, Jeremy Aguilar, jumped in. "Last month I had 2 deaf travelers stopped because they spoke too softly. Agent claimed they were evasive." A few heads shook grimly. Wanda turned to Raymond. "Your report is about to become the backbone of a wider compliance review. Congress is already asking for briefings." Raymond didn't smile. He wasn't interested in politics. He wanted policies, accountability, clarity. "I'm not after headlines," he told them flatly. "I want the procedures fixed." Wanda nodded. "You might get both. The Office of Civil Rights wants to coordinate." Jeremy muttered, "They should have been involved years ago." The meeting went on for another half hour. By the time it wrapped up, Raymond had 7 new assignments and a pile of incidents to analyze from the past 6 months. It felt like trying to climb a hill with one shoe missing. But momentum had shifted, not because of a fiery speech or a viral stunt, but because someone finally caught the system acting exactly how so many had quietly described for years. In Atlanta, the terminal had changed too. Gate C14 now had 2 cameras mounted above the counter, offering new angles in high resolution. Every gate agent had been ordered to complete new training within 72 hours. Supervisors were required to submit weekly reports to the FAA. It wasn't a revolution, but it was motion. One veteran agent, Denise Trammell, who had worked the terminal for 15 years, noticed it right away. "They're walking softer now," she told a co-worker while scanning boarding passes. "Funny how quiet people get when someone important gets treated like we do all the time." Her co-worker, a young man named Rico, looked at her curiously. "You ever have to work with Wilcox?" Denise nodded. "Twice." "You could feel it? Like the rules changed depending who walked up to the counter?" Rico asked, Why didn't anybody speak up? Denise met his eyes. Who would ve listened? That question sat heavy with Rico for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, the airline's legal department had started digging through 5 years of gate agent records. Several other employees popped up with high conflict patterns. One in Miami, quietly transferred after multiple disputes. Another in Dallas, repeatedly flagging young men with dual citizenships. They hadn't made headlines yet. But after Wilcox, those days were numbered. Raymond received an email from a former airline worker who'd seen the video. Wish I'd said something when I had the chance. The body was brief. I worked next to her for 6 months. You were right to write it all down. Thank you. Raymond didn't reply. But he saved it in a folder titled Testimonies. Because what mattered now wasn't what had happened, it was what people were finally willing to say out loud. 1 week later, Raymond stood at a podium in a Washington, D.C. conference room, speaking to transportation executives, FAA investigators, and civil rights observers. It wasn't meant to be a press event, but reporters had shown up anyway. Because the story had outgrown every expectation. Larger than anyone expected. Raymond adjusted the microphone, steady but unassuming. I wasn't trying to make an example out of anyone. He began, voice calm, measured. I was doing what I've done for nearly 30 years, quietly observing the systems that hold up public safety and sometimes public trust. He paused, letting that land. When a gate agent tears up a passport because they don't like the look of the person holding it, that isn't just misconduct. That's negligence. That's bias. And when it goes unchecked, it becomes policy in everything but name. Silence spread across the room. Raymond glanced down at his notes. He'd rewritten the speech 3 times, stripping out every bit of spin until only the truth remained, raw, honest, and heavy. I've been asked if I forgive her. The answer is I don't know. That's not the point. The point is whether we're finally ready to change how things are done. A few questions were allowed. One reporter from The Atlantic spoke up with the one that mattered most. Mr. Dandridge, do you believe anything will actually change? Raymond paused. I believe people are watching now, he said simply. That's a start. Back in Atlanta, the airport felt different but not entirely. That morning, a memo had gone out. Random FAA monitoring of international gates would begin immediately. Supervisors would be directly accountable for repeated complaints, and Stephanie Wilcox's termination was official. Her security access had been revoked at every terminal nationwide. In the employee break room, 2 agents watched the memo scroll across the flat-screen TV. Think they're gonna make us sit through another seminar, one muttered. Tanya, an agent with 20 years on the job, shook her head. They can throw all the training they want at us, she said. But until they start hiring people who know how to treat passengers like humans, nothing sticks. A supervisor stepped in just in time to catch that line. Got something to say, Tanya? She met his eyes, unflinching. I already said it. He didn't push, just grabbed his coffee and left. The next morning, Raymond sat at his desk with a chipped mug of coffee, ignoring a flood of interview requests. He deleted most of them unread. He wasn't trying to become a public figure, he wanted the focus to stay where it belonged, fixing the system from the inside. That afternoon, a scheduled Zoom call with FAA field officers brought faces from around the country onto his screen: Detroit, Seattle, Tampa, San Jose. Some were familiar, others new. Wanda Kim kicked things off. Let's do a quick round table, she said. Tell me one thing you've seen in the last week that gives you hope. Raymond listened. I saw an agent apologize to a passenger after a harsh screening. Someone from Philadelphia said. 17 years here, never saw that before. In Dallas, a team called out one of their own for being rude. Another reported. That never used to happen without a supervisor. When it was Raymond's turn, he chose his words carefully. Hope doesn't come from policies, he said. It comes from people being willing to speak when something's wrong. Now that the public has seen what wrong looks like, they're finally asking the right questions. He paused. My job was never to embarrass anyone. My job was to shine a light in the corners where things get ignored. Outside, the early spring air in D.C. felt cool and dry. Kids walked home from school, traffic pulsed along the boulevard in front of FAA headquarters just as it always had. But for the first time in a long time, Raymond felt the silence had truly been broken. Now, he thought, they had to decide what they would do with the noise. 2 weeks later, Raymond returned to the Atlanta airport, this time without the briefcase, without the hidden mission. He was there just to see it for himself, clear-eyed. Gate C-14 looked the same, dull carpet, plastic chairs, busy travelers. But there was a subtle difference. The staff seemed sharper, more cautious. Every interaction was a bit more careful, not forced, but more aware. An older woman with a question about a delayed flight was met with a calm explanation. A man worried about missing his connection was guided personally to a departure screen, the staffer double-checking the gate for him. Raymond sat nearby, simply observing. A young black couple with a baby approached the counter. A new agent, someone Raymond hadn't seen before, smiled at them, cooed at the child, and offered them early boarding without them even asking. A few feet away, a mother quietly took a photo of the family heading down the jet bridge, probably to post later with a caption like "Traveling with kindness today." Raymond didn't record any of it. It wasn't for a report. It was just for him. He rose, moving toward the escalator. As he passed a wall of framed airline policies, he caught his own reflection, older, worn down in places, but steady. He thought of Stephanie Wilcox, not with anger, but with clarity. She hadn't done anything new. She'd just been confident enough to do it on camera. Her mistake wasn't just in action, but in believing no one would ever question her. People like Raymond had lived with that certainty their whole lives. As he exited the terminal, a middle-aged man with a cane stepped aside to let him through the security doors. They shared a brief nod, wordless, but powerful. Outside, the wind tugged at Raymond's jacket. His ride was waiting at the curb. He climbed in, and the driver, a woman with long braids and a warm voice, glanced back through the mirror. "Mr. Dandridge. That's me. You're the guy from the video, right?" Raymond smiled faintly. "I guess I am." She was quiet a moment, then added, "My brother works TSA. He says folks at the airport been acting real different lately. I think you lit a fire." Raymond shook his head. "I didn't light anything," he said. "I just didn't let them put it out." They rode in silence for a while, passing billboards and exit signs along I-285. Then the driver spoke again, thoughtful. "People forget that stuff matters, being seen, being heard, not being talked down to." "They don't forget," Raymond replied. "They're just taught not to expect it." She nodded. As they pulled up to the hotel, she asked, "You think things will actually change?" Raymond paused, hand on the door handle. "I think they already are," he said. "But only if people keep speaking up." even when it's uncomfortable. That night, in his hotel room, Raymond flipped on the news. Another clip was making rounds, this time from Minneapolis. A passenger was challenged for not matching his ID, but a supervisor had stepped in quickly, defused the situation, and apologized. It didn't make prime time, but it made a difference. Raymond closed his laptop and leaned back, thinking about the next generation, the ones who might someday board a plane without carrying the burden of someone else's suspicion. Maybe they would never know his name. That was fine. What mattered was that someone had seen the moment and chosen not to look away. Because sometimes, to break a system, all you need is one moment of truth in a place built on routine. One voice that doesn't rise in anger, but stands in quiet certainty. One decision to stop staying silent. And if you're still following this story, still thinking it was just about one man and his passport, think again. It's about every moment we let pass. It's about what happens when, finally, we don't.